We need to stop shaming people for the way that they create their personal costumes. Hey everyone, this is not how I expected to be showing you the new basement crafting space that I have going on here, but a lot of my life has not really been going according to plan this year, so I'm just gonna go with it, you know. I will say that yes, the basement is done, however, everything is not moved in yet, and you may see the shelves behind me. Things are gonna be moved around a little bit. It's not gonna be the same. I haven't really figured out what I want to do. Yeah, anyways, you're not here for that. Kind of wanted to talk through some things because things have been a lot different this year in terms of cosplay, as well as just my mental health and getting a grip around this whole ADHD diagnosis and stuff like that. And I always feel weird about making videos that are more so about my life or talking about what I'm going through, but they always seem to be the ones that you guys resonate with, so I'm just gonna roll with it. And side note, as I'm recording this video, I hit 10,000 subscribers on YouTube, which is wild to me. I have been on YouTube for about maybe 2.5 years at this point. I can't really remember exactly. It has been a wild ride and it has not been a very fast growing thing, and I'm totally okay with that. I really like the slow growth over here. YouTube is actually my smallest platform that I'm on, other than Twitter, which I really don't count because I don't really use Twitter correctly. But yeah, I just want to thank everyone who has subscribed over the years and for showing up and watching my videos. It really means a lot to me. So I'm just gonna get into the meat of why I wanted to make this video, and that is to talk about something that I see a lot in the cosplay community, and especially being a part of the 3D printing community, and that is this entitlement that people have to the way that people make certain things. So what I'm trying to get at is I make a lot of tutorials on YouTube. I have made tutorials about 3D printing. I have made tutorials about, you know, making things out of EVA foam and Worbla and stuff like that. However, I get a lot of comments on my 3D printing tutorials, especially, you know, things like, oh, step one, make sure you own a 3D printer first, or I really appreciate this tutorial, however, I wish you hadn't 3D printed because I don't have a 3D printer. And I just want to make one thing clear right off the bat. I love 3D printing, however, I understand that 3D printing is not for everybody. Not everyone has the space for a 3D printer or has the, I guess, like the bandwidth to deal with a 3D printer, because having a 3D printer in your space and keeping it upkept and running correctly is not for everybody. And I didn't think it was for me either until I just decided to bite the bullet, and now I love it. My issue comes from whenever people comment on tutorials or even just comment on someone's cosplay in general of how they made it, and they're upset that they're not making it in the way that they would make it. We need to stop shaming people for the way that they create their personal costumes. If you're not paying somebody for the costume that you're either going to wear or that you need for a company or something like that, you really have no right to come into someone's comment section or anything like that and get upset with how they decided to make their costume. I have experienced this a lot at conventions, actually, when someone will come up to me and say I was wearing like my Bo-Katan costume that I've 3D printed. They will come up to me and, you know, say, oh, love your costume, blah, blah, blah. You know, how did you make it? And I say, oh, I 3D printed it. These are these files. You know, I printed it myself. I did all the scaling. I did all the finishing work and stuff like that. And I can almost see the lights go out in their eyes because I know that they, for some reason, don't like 3D printing, or they think that 3D printing is like cheating, or it's some kind of like hack to get cosplays done faster. And I always really hate that because I love talking about how people make costumes. There are so many different ways to make a costume. There is 3D printing, there's EVA foam, there's Worbla, there's Sintra, there's cardboard. Go on YouTube, there are a ton of different ways to make a certain costume. You can utilize different methods, and I'm not even getting into sewing and all that stuff. There's so many ways you can make a costume, and to think that like one way is somehow better than another is really, really dumb, in my opinion. There is a reason that I have been doing a lot of 3D printing over the past 2 years, and that is because with the pandemic, with lockdown, and with, you know, my mental health, as well as going through this ADHD diagnosis, 3D printing has been an absolute lifesaver for me. And that's kind of dramatic, but when I say this, I probably would not have made nearly as much stuff as I did over the past 2 years if it wasn't for 3D printing. It alleviates so much of my problems with my executive dysfunction. And what I mean by that is like the act of actually getting started on a costume, or, you know, being overwhelmed by the amount of things that I need to do on a costume. So for example, I can very easily talk myself into going out into my garage and sanding some 3D prints for an hour, as opposed to, you know, going through all of the steps of finding a pattern or even patterning out something out of EVA foam and then gluing it together and all of that stuff. To me, EVA foam right now just seems so challenging to work with. Even though I've worked with it in the past, I've made multiple costumes out of EVA foam. I am not in the space right now where I can work with EVA foam because it's just too much for my brain to handle with YouTube and everything else going on in my life. So right now, 3D printing has been an absolute game changer because I can still be creative, I still have that outlet, and it kind of it also works on the other side because it also allows me to tinker with things. You know, I have been dabbling in 3D modeling as well, so I'm learning a lot. There's just so much about cosplay that is just so great that I think it's really silly that a lot of people in this community kind of gatekeep or get upset when people make a costume a certain way. I just think it's so weird and unnecessary. I'm not even going to get into some of the groups that can be a little bit elitist about certain ways of making a costume. What I'm trying to get at is make a costume how you want to make a costume. Use whatever resources you have available to you. I have 3D printers. I have EVA foam. I also, if you didn't know, work a day job. I make a reliable amount of money every month and am able to pay for the things that I make on this channel. I also have a Patreon in which that money goes towards making videos for you guys, as well as paying for the materials that I use on this channel. The material shaming thing kind of goes along with this whole idea of resources, and you really never know what someone is working through while they're making a costume. You don't know people's budgets. Basically, what I want you all to know and what I want you to come away with whenever you're watching my videos is that you can make a costume however you want. If you don't want to 3D print something, I hope that you can still get something out of the way that I, you know, do my weathering or the way that I paint things on this channel, because I'm never going to make everyone happy. There are always going to be the people that want me to make a set of armor out of EVA foam whenever I 3D printed it, and I just don't have the resources available to me to make a tutorial both ways. Believe me, I wish that I could, because my brain is always thinking of all of the different ways that you can make a costume. And I just want you to know that you don't need a 3D printer in order to cosplay. That's currently the phase of life that I'm in, is that I'm really enjoying my 3D printers. You don't need to make a cosplay a certain way for it to be a legitimate cosplay. And we really need to be better as a community in general in just being more accepting of the different ways that people put together costumes, because I see a lot of the arguments for 3D printing and people saying that it's somehow cheating or a lesser version of making things, or it's not handmade, which let's be real, a lot of things, pretty much nothing is handmade because you're still buying supplies for it, but I digress. There's just a lot of other things in the world to be worrying about other than the way that people make their costumes. And again, like I said earlier on in the video, if you're not paying someone to make the costume for you, or you're not somehow, you know, involved in the process and that sort of thing, you have no right to tell someone how to make a costume. The whole reason I love cosplay as a hobby is that there are just so many different ways to make a costume. There are so many different materials and different techniques, and there's more and more coming out every day that make this hobby more accessible to people. That's a huge thing that I don't see a lot of people talking about with 3D printing, is that 3D printing has made cosplay accessible to a whole broad new group of people, and we should be absolutely celebrating that. This isn't even going into the fact that 3D printing has made cosplay and just crafting in general accessible to those with disabilities. Having ADHD, 3D printing has been just such a great thing because I can, you know, hyper focus on getting everything scaled and printed out, and then I have like a whole bin full of things that I can just sand at any moment whenever the, feeling strikes. And this also goes for people with actual physical disabilities who maybe can't work for hours on end on a project. And 3D printing something saves them a lot of time, or if they don't have like the very small, like fine motor skills in order to make these really tiny things, which I even struggle with. I really struggle with making really tiny stuff. Now they can just 3D print it and worry about the bigger parts of a costume, the stuff that they really want to work on. We really need to be better as just a community in general of just stop shaming people for the way that they make their costumes, stop shaming people for the materials that they use. And how many times have I said this in this video already? Let me know down in the comments below if this is something that like you have experienced on social media, just people being like upset with the way that you make a costume. I really would love to know that I'm not alone, because this really feels like something that I constantly deal with. Maybe it's just because I make tutorials and I can never satisfy everybody with the way that I make a costume. That's what I wanted to come on here and talk to you guys about this week. Again, I apologize that I haven't been as consistent with videos. This basement reno really took a toll on my mental health as well as just physical in general. I am so burnt out on just working down here as well as, just working in cosplay in general. But I'm hoping that, once I get the space set up and things kind of, return back to normal and I'm no longer living amidst a bunch of boxes surrounding me, that things will, eventually get a little bit more consistent over here. But anyways, thank you again to my Patreon supporters for always having my back and just being awesome people to chat with over on Discord. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will catch you guys next time. Bye!